and welcome to another episode of REDtalks. I'm your host from F5 Networks, Nathan Pierce, and I have with me today both Tom and Andy. Tom's been on many times. Andy, first time on. Guys, introduce yourselves. Remind our audience what you guys are all about.
After you, Andy.
Sure. After me. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Actually, Tom and I, we just did a podcast on metrics-driven NetOps, right? Tell you who I am, right? But I'm very passionate about metrics, especially I come from the application side. I've been a performance engineer for the last 17, 18 years, working for different companies that were dealing and are dealing around application performance, end user experience, how applications run in the infrastructure, especially now in distributed environments, whether using container technology, cloud, whatever it is. I work for a company called Dynatrace right now. We do application monitoring, so end user monitoring, application monitoring, and we just try to help our customers that are pushing applications through a development pipeline in a more rapid pace these days to make sure that the code changes that they're pushing through doesn't have any negative impact either on their end users, on their infrastructure, or on their costs. So metrics,
I imagine, yeah.
It is, yeah.
That's very important because you don't want to be deploying to infrastructure that just doesn't have the resources available to even take that workload or that change or those kind of things. I mean, that's just creating a chaos button, really, not having those metrics there to make those clever decisions.
Exactly. And so the idea is if we look at metrics while we develop the code changes and push it through a pipeline using, for instance, Jenkins, to run your automated tests, to push it through different phases of your life cycle. Maybe in a dev environment, then in a staging environment, you run some tests. And if you look at the metrics and you understand what the code change actually means, it could potentially increase interaction with the database by 10%. It could allocate more memory for your key features. And if you now know, hey, this key feature that I'm changing is used by 80% of my people on the peak load, and I'm now changing it so that it requires 20% more database interactions, then I can make a better decision whether or not a good code change. If I want to move it forward because I have to, but then I also need to think about provisioning more, or whether I put a stop to it and say, well, we don't have the infrastructure or it's too costly, so let's figure out how to make this code more efficient before we deploy it.
So it's about making informed decisions then, instead of just deploying into a black hole of who knows whether it was successful. Now we can at least, and I like that last example you gave, even making the decision of ceasing the deployment, because why do something that's going to cause damage? That's a pretty critical step.
Exactly, and damage can be in two ways, right? Damage could on one side mean, you mentioned it, if you don't have the infrastructure and then you're maxing out your resources, your application performance goes down, your users are unhappy. Or the other way could be, you have a scalable architecture, you may run in a cloud and you just scale up, but then at the end of the month, somebody has to pay the extra bill. And the question is, are you comfortable with paying that amount of more money for a certain amount of feature where you only get paying users? So that's kind of the efficiency of software. And I believe we as an industry, we need to go more into an engineering practice where we really look into not only do we build the right things in an efficient, ecological, sustainable way, if you want to use all of these terms, right? Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. And interesting what you said about cloud just then, because I remember when cloud was first hitting the media, it was all about saving money. And then organizations started moving workloads to cloud and nobody saved any money. And actually the bigger game was agility and how quickly you could start consuming resources. Well, of course, that then can very quickly lead into a negative situation where you've consumed all the resources and now you have to pay for them all. Mm-hmm. So putting in some measures there to make sure that that consumption model is actually within reason or within budget and feasibility. I mean, you could have a small startup consuming way more than what they could ever afford to pay for, and that's probably not a great thing to run into.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, yeah, but that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what we try to do. We try to educate application teams to not only look at features and then make them beautiful, but actually make them efficient. And we bake metrics into the whole application delivery lifecycle. So in development, in CI/CD, in staging, in load testing, but also in performance, to then figure out, hey, is this code change potentially impacting us? And if we cannot, if we think everything is good in pre-prod and we push it out to production, we want to keep monitoring and figuring out, well, what was the real impact? Was there a good impact, a negative impact? And based on that, close the feedback loop, right? And in the end, I guess all will be here, our audience is about, if at least, so from my perspective, having application teams feel responsible for the stuff that they actually do, and feeling responsible for how their code runs in production, how it impacts others, whether it's end users, their colleagues in operations on the network side. And so, yeah, I think metrics makers, as you said, allow us to make better informed decisions.
That's cool. I like that. I like this message. Informed automation versus, yeah, fingers crossed automation. Tom, we've not even talked to you yet. How dare I? This is your third episode. You're literally a REDtalks veteran from the scope of what REDtalks as a series has been. Tom, just remind everyone, who are you? What do you do?
Sure. Expression you just coined, Nathan. It was informed automation. I really love the rhetoric around that. So I'm going to try and include that in my little bio. So I'm Tom McGonagle. I'm an FSC. I'm a field systems engineer here at F5. And I'm a very, very passionate DevOps activist. And I'm very, very active within the Boston DevOps community. And I've been an organizer of conferences and meetups. And I just celebrated my 10th DevOps birthday. I got into Puppet on January 17th of 2007. And most recently, before F5, I worked at CloudBees, the Jenkins company. And in one of our episodes before, I mentioned that everything looks like a CI/CD problem to me. And so what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be talking about a Jenkins prototype that I've created. And I'm going to enlist Andy's and your help in explaining it and articulating it and making it understandable to our listeners and our viewers.
Now, I'm particularly excited about this demonstration, but there's a question I want to ask you, which maybe our audience is already wondering. What's a guy that came from working with Puppet and then Jenkins doing in a company like F5? Do you want to just walk us through that merging of those two kind of areas?
I focused on networking, and about 9 years ago, I bought a F5 appliance for a large dating website that I was working for. So kind of love brought me to F5, and so I just threw myself into F5 and just fell in love with it myself. And I was working in this dating website, and my boss Paul Salzberg met me and liked me and thought I'd make a good SE. And like I said, I focused on networking in graduate school, and particularly I have a little bit of a kind of an odd networking background. I focused on Wi-Fi, wireless networking, and believe it or not, Africa as part of my career. I worked in Africa on HIV drug distribution networks for several years at Booz Allen Hamilton, and that was literally the most fulfilling part of my career. But the short answer is love. Love brought me to F5, Nathan, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, it was the same thing for me. I was in a very small startup, and I kept coming across this company every time I spoke to a customer that was doing these amazing things, and I was admiring them from afar for quite a few years. And yeah, love brought me as well. I like this. So I'm going to have to get this into a marketing campaign somewhere. This is awesome. So anyone else out there looking to work at an awesome company, yeah, love can bring you in as well. So the other angle for me, I mean, the reason I'm particularly excited about this Jenkins demonstration is that there's this idea, we keep hearing about DevOps being, developers and developer tools and collaboration with IT operations. And IT operations is very broad. But I think a lot of the texts I come across and things published, on the internet and blogs, etc., they talk about operations as in the deployment of the server and putting the stack on it and the runtime and making sure the right libraries and support are on there so that the code deployment can work. However, what a lot of them don't go into actually is to also encompass programmable infrastructure, because you know what, a lot of companies actually have all of these technologies for DDoS mitigation, for for IPS IDS, for web application firewall, and you know what, a lot of those aren't just software stacks that can get pulled out of an SCM. They're technologies, they're physical devices often that also need to be programmed into the deployment tool chain. So I'm really excited about the fact that to me, this seems very normal, because obviously I work in the product development team for programmability and automation. But I think there are many out there that haven't considered that step within automation to actually touch the infrastructure that all of it's running on as well, and extending the pipeline into those realms.
I think that's incredibly well put. Something we were talking about before the episode started is I want to really draw attention to my intent demo, or this Jenkins prototype, and it is to shift the orchestration, the programmability to the application developers from the traditional network operations staff. And when I say shift left, what I'm talking about is the development pipeline. It's the dev, it's the QA, it's the pre-prod, it's the prod, and typically the orchestration really happens at pre-prod or prod level. But what I'm talking about is actually shifting it all the way to the left to the developers. And for us, with the capabilities, there's really nothing stopping us from tapping into this market, if you will. And I don't mean to make it sound like a sales pitch but I guess it kind of is. We're trying to tap into this group. Software is king, application right now in the industry, and frankly, they need to be aware of the capabilities of a BIG-IP F5 device, and they can improve the performance and the reliability of their applications if they have a little bit of knowledge about what we're capable of doing, and if we give them the keys to the kingdom, the orchestration, I think they're just going to eat it up. And this is an attempt for me to shift the orchestration and the automation to the left, all the way to the application developer. And I hope that's clear as I go through my demo. Just wanted to underline that concept.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate you explaining that a little better. But shall we jump into the demo then? I mean, unless there's anything else you wanted to share to sort of explain the context, or should we go straight for it?
Let's go for it. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. And so, first of all, I just want to call everyone's attention to AWS. I have my demo running in AWS, and I'm using the Ohio availability zone to run an instance of Jenkins. And this instance of Jenkins is running here, right here. I'm just going to back out to the main page of Jenkins, and we've hit a snag. So apologize for the snag.
No problem. It's not a real demo unless something goes wrong. Now we know it's not just a screen recording and it's a real demo.
That's right. So I'm a little bit confused by what is happening. It appears that Jenkins is up, and I'm just going to kill the Jenkins process. I have it running here. Maybe it is down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start up a new terminal. I'm going to go to this Jenkins instance in my terminal. So as you said, there's no demo without a snag, right? And so I'm just going to get the IP address, and I'm going to SSH into it. And I'm just going to restart Jenkins.
So maybe while we're watching, we are waiting for the demo to come back up. One aspect that I like so much about, and also the discussion we had earlier, the shifting left, the orchestration, and empowering developers to actually think about infrastructure as code, network as code. I said earlier, developers also installation is actually doing from a resource consumption perspective on a feature-to-feature level. And if they build the orchestration, or we are changing these features, then they can also anticipate on what additional resources they need. And either they can do this in the deployment script, so when they deploy it, they know how many more resources they need to provision, or if they build this in a dynamic scalable architecture, use both monitoring data like response time, resource consumption, what I said earlier, database statements, all that stuff, and use that live while people are working with the app to then spin up or spin down or change the configuration of infrastructure. Power of automation, right? As you said it, the power of automating deployments, but the power also of automating your orchestration layer by looking at CPU and memory, but breaking it down into the application, into features.
Yeah, application.
Thank you, Andy.
People talk about application performance, but I always like to remind them that it's actually important to measure application experience. So not just this packet traverse, this like CPU, RAM, those kind of metrics, they can be quite misleading. I mean, a good app's going to use whatever resources available, and not just sit there running at its absolute minimum. You know, the more things it can store in RAM, which is faster to access than disk, the better. So it should be using almost all of its RAM all the time if it's going to be, you know, locally caching things to send out to users. So measuring application experience, the perception that the user has of it, is really important for making informed decisions in automation.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Jenkins Backup. So in order to run Jenkins, it's a very simple startup. It's just Java space minus jar space Jenkins.war. And what I'm going to call everyone's attention to, in the East availability zone, I have a BIG-IP and a web server running Blodgett, which is a hackable website. And so I have an AMI1, which is the website, and I have an F5 device. And this F5 device is living right here. And I'm going to log into the F5 device. And this F5 device is just a basic install. It's just ready to be configured via Jenkins. And as it comes up, I'm just going to point out a couple of things in the LTM module. I'm going to go to virtual servers. And you can see there's no virtual servers. I'm going to go to iRules. And you can see there's no iRules as soon as it comes up.
For our listeners, iRules are
well, I mean, there are iRules, but they're
scripting languages.
Default iRules. I'm sorry, say again, Nathan?
I just wanted to explain that iRules are the data plane scripting language within F5 BIG-IP's operating system. So it's an event-based scripting language where you can modify, react, do many different things to transactions as they traverse the BIG-IP.
Exactly. Thank you for that excellent explanation. And when there are iRules, the BIG-IP comes with default ones, but I'm going to be creating 2 iRules as part of my Jenkins workflow. I just want to call everyone's attention to that there are no pools, there are no nodes, finally, there are no nodes. And so what we have here is we have a Jenkins instance with an F5 file. And the reason I called it F5 file is I'm trying to emulate a Docker file or a Jenkins file, which I'm going to be talking about today, or even a Vagrant file. These are configuration files that live in your infrastructure code that configure a particular technology. For example, a Docker file. A Docker allows you to build Docker containers. A Jenkins file allows you to build a Jenkins pipeline. A Vagrant file allows you to build a Vagrant instance. And so what I'm trying to do, Nathan, is I'm trying to emulate that idea. And I call it F5 file. And inside F5 file, all I have is a very simple pipeline which only does one thing. And the one thing that it does is it downloads Jenkins file from Git. So pipeline script from SCM. SCM stands for Source Code Manager. And then I have my repository, which is here. This is the repository. I'm going to go to this tab in just one second. And it's just going to McGonagle /f5 file.git. And then all I'm doing is the script path that I'm using is called Jenkins file. So let me show you guys what that Jenkins file is. But before I do that, what the pipeline looks like. And this is what pipeline is going to build. So we're going to have a preparation step, we're going to have a build step, we're going to have an approval step because I'm using continuous delivery and not continuous deployment, and then a re-enable step where we re-enable the website. And so what we're doing is we're going to be building we're going to be downloading the software. We're going to be running a couple Ansible tests on the software. We're going to be building the infrastructure using Ansible, and then we have an approval step, and then we re-enable the web server. And so I'm just going to go into the F5 file, and the first thing I'm going to show you is the Jenkins file, which creates that graphical pipeline that we just were looking at. So we have a stage preparation that I mentioned, and all it does is download the Git repository. We have a testing phase, which uses Ansible lint, which we talked on podcast. And then we have Ansible review. And so these are my testing stages. This is making sure that the F5 build.yaml file is Ansible compliant. And then we have an Ansible playbook DSL call, which uses username and password to run against the BIG-IP, and it runs this F5 file build.yaml. And so that's going to be the next file that I'm going to show as part of my demo. So it uses this F5 file. And then the next step that happens is I send out a Slack message that the F5 file build ran successfully. And so this uses a unidirectional chat ops technique to notify the Slack channel that the build has occurred accurately and correctly. And then I have an input step. So I'm using continuous delivery. So I want to make sure that I want to proceed. And I have this proceed option. And then what I do is I re-enable the web server. So I haven't showed you the Ansible code yet. But in this step, I instantiate a node. I instantiate a pool. I instantiate iRules. And I instantiate a VIP. And then I remove the pool. And what I do is I have that serves a sorry server. So it says, sorry, we're down right now. And then you click on proceed. And then what happens is you do an Ansible playbook, and it re-enables that node in the pool. And then you can get to the Budget website. And then finally, I send out a Slack message that the F5 file node has been re-enabled. So I'm just going to stop there right now and ask Andy and Nathan if you guys have any questions about Jenkins File and what I'm trying to do in this pipeline.
I really appreciate you adding in the Slack channel, given the last episode we had with Jason Hand, who wrote the book on ChatOps. So I think that's great as far as that cultural step of bringing organizations together. I mean, even people who are not in the technology team can be watching that channel, and they don't have to keep ringing up and asking, IT operations, have you deployed it yet? Was it successful? What have you done? It's updating the Slack group. It's telling you each step that it's doing. So everybody already is informed. And I really like that step that you've put those in there.
I want to say I also, I played around the demo that I'm going to show you at the Jenkins meetup in Boston next month. It's also about using the Jenkins pipeline feature. And a similar thing, obviously, that I do is in the preparation, I compile the application code itself. In testing, I run some unit tests, I run some functional tests, I run maybe even some web API tests. And then this is actually when I look at these test results, but not only at the functional tests, these metrics that I mentioned earlier, and say, is the application good enough, or did it change significantly so that I need to do, I need an approval step to say, are we good with the additional resource consumption? If so, then this could actually automatically flow into your provisioning scripts, and 20% more memory, more. Right? So these are all things. It's perfect. Yeah.
Oh, Andy, I really love that comment. I think that's a great recommendation. And so that is my vision for my eventual vision for this. This is just a prototype at this point, but the testing is what is automated testing, which we discussed in our practices and principles, Nathan, is, I don't know, maybe the most important thing it's like, it's really, really hard, and Andy's an expert at it, but you kind of need an expert and someone who's really, really good at it to make it sing. But it's one of the most important aspects of DevOps, and to have automated testing for your network operations gear, whether it's an F5 or whether it's another device, is an incredible gift. It's an incredible opportunity for the industry. And if we could espouse that, and if we could get people thinking about just testing I'm not going to swear, but testing the heck out of their network operations gear and configurations, I mean, we're really onto something. You know, that's a tremendous amount of value we'd be delivering to the marketplace.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I appreciate that extra context. So I want to see it running.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to show the F5 file build. This is an Ansible script. So when I say F5 file, this is the Docker file, but what it uses Ansible. And so I have various things. I'm building a node. I'm building 2 nodes. I'm building a pool. I'm adding the 2 nodes to the pool member. I'm building an iRule, which is the sorry page that I mentioned. And then I'm building a Bodget rewrite, which rewrites the slash in the URL to /Bodget. Bodget lives in a subdirectory called Bodget. And then finally, what I do is I have this VIP that I create, and then I drop the members out. And then the second step after I proceed, I add the member back in. So this is a BIG-IP pool member, and it's adding it back in with the state present. And so, and to your point, let's watch it run. So all we do is we come back into Jenkins and we say now, and then build the new build. As we can see right here, it downloaded the Git repository. It goes through and it runs Ansible, and I can show everyone what that looks like. Ansible lint and Ansible review. It does the build itself, and the build is running the Ansible code. And it just takes a couple minutes, and then we get the Jenkins, the Slack channel message that it ran successfully, and we can go into the BIG-IP now, and we can see we have a virtual server. We can see that we have 2 new iRules.
I love the chat-ups. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
So
nice. We have a sorry iRule and the Bodget rewrite iRule. We have a pool.
Thought again on the pipeline. You know, obviously I come from the application side, and application developers, you know, we like to play around with blue-green deployments. We like to play around with A/B testing. So one of the things, if I am an application developer and I'm pushing through a new feature, I can automatically integrate your options here that you provide through, you know, infrastructure as code. I want to configure my rules so that none of my users are going to see the other version. So I think application developers, as you said, shifting left, we need to educate them and what that means for them if they do A/B testing, if they do blue-green deployments, because as part of their deployment strategy, they need to figure out how do they make these features available. And one way is obviously to configure your routers correctly and your load balancers correctly.
That's a great point. And so blue-green deployments is a methodology that is a best practice right now in terms of moving your infrastructure, moving your code to production. And I've been trying to use my F5 file to have a blue-green type deployment using Jenkins. And I think it's just a great point, Andy. I think it's just a great point. But what's going on right now is this system maintenance is being seen. What I did, Nathan, is I went into the BIG-IP and I got the Elastic IP address, which is its IP address in AWS, and we're covering the system maintenance page. And so, And so what we do next is we go back to Jenkins and we go to the approval step. We click proceed, and then it's going to run and it's going to re-enable the website. It gives us a message in Slack, and then we go to the site unavailable page, and we get served with the which is being served by the website. And so what I did is I had a CD pipeline, I had a continuous delivery pipeline utilizing Ansible as the F5 file, similar to a Docker file or a Jenkins file, and then I leveraged the Jenkins file pipeline as code technology, a pipeline for my BIG-IP so that I can shift the configuration and orchestration and automation from the right, the typical network operations engineer, to the left for an application developer.
So you just go back to the budget store page for a moment there?
Sure.
Yeah, I thought so. Gizmos are on sale. So no, that was an excellent demo. That was a great demo, Tom. But I guess for people from the NetOps world, I mean, your traditional NetOps guy is probably very familiar already with the BIG-IP. Might be asking, well, why did you show me that demonstration in Jenkins, and what's this Jenkins thing? And I realized I don't think we kind of set that expectation at the beginning, but this is a really common tool. A lot of people are using this already, and when developers are kind of making a change and they want to be able to test one service from another, and then they're coming to their infrastructure team or looking after load balancing and delivering that service, they need to ask them things like, oh, is it possible for you to distribute, say, 5% of traffic to this one server and then the rest scattered across the other ones? And the F5 engineer will probably think, oh, I can use the pool ratio feature where I can distribute the load balancing. Well, what we've just done here is we've connected those two things together. This is what we meant by, the developers pushed out a change to code. They've used Jenkins to do that push. The push was just a small change to one server, and that's why they've come with that question saying, now I just want to give some of my traffic to one. That's what that A/B testing is you've just explained. Well, the tool they probably used is Jenkins to do that deployment before they raised the ticket manually with infrastructure. So what you just demonstrated was the elimination of that manual process of raising the ticket, where we could potentially bring in the A/B testing like into the workflow in Jenkins, so that it just pushes that change to the BIG-IP as well.
If I could speak to why Jenkins, right? I think that's a really great question that you asked. So 100,000 companies. When I was at CloudBees, I had 22 engagements at Fortune 1000 companies. They all use Jenkins. If people are a company and you're using BIG-IP, the chances are there's someone using Jenkins at your organization. And so if the developers are already using Jenkins, my thoughts, and I need some help explaining this, Nathan, but the BIG-IP should be a part of the continuous delivery pipeline. We are a significant and important piece in the push to production. There are configuration changes that need to happen, whether it's blue-green deployment or whether it's just you bring the site offline like I did with my system maintenance, and there's steps that need to happen, and facilitating it with your current. For example, if your company's using Jenkins, is a good idea. It's a way to play nice with the to increase your DevOps chops. It's a way to be a good DevOps person. But the other aspect, and I'm a little bit hesitant to bring this up, is that there's a technology called from Ansible called Ansible, and Jenkins plus Ansible is poor man's Ansible tower. And so basically, what you want tower, but what you're doing is you're getting it in this open source free version, and it just takes a little bit of scripting with the pipelines, and the pipelines are very easy to understand and very easy to utilize. And it's poor man's Ansible. Like it resonated at one of my customers who's a major university. And so they're going to start using Ansible tower. I said, you know what? I've got a solution for you. You can use Jenkins and Ansible together, and it's poor man's Ansible tower. And I think me saying this might not make any friends over at Red Hat, but it's an aspect of Jenkins. Jenkins has over 1,000 different modules. And it's incredibly used. The Slack module, the Ansible module, the Terraform module, code coverage, testing. There's a Jenkins module for it. It's a very, very powerful piece of technology.
So you know what? The way I'm going to interpret what you said is we'll work with any tool. Ansible, Jenkins, Ansible Tower. It's REST API calls, right?
Very well put.
What are your thoughts, Andy? What do you think about all this bringing infrastructure into the tool chain and the deployment pipelines?
Well, application side, and this is a new field for me, but obviously I see that what I mentioned in the beginning, we see more and more people moving towards a more elastic infrastructure and giving more power to the application teams. But the application teams then also need to understand that the application needs to run on an infrastructure, and they're already automating everything. They're using Jenkins. They're using test-driven development, and now they just need to an additional layer on top of it, being the infrastructure correctly so that their applications run. And with this conversation, I really believe that A/B testing, blue-green deployment will be a perfect use case where their eyes go up and say, wow, my God, finally I can control without having to talk to anybody, begging for rules to be changed. I do this now as part of my delivery pipeline. And that's beautiful. And the next cool thing is if they deploy something into production and something fails because they have monitoring, right? End user monitoring, as you said. Well, you know what? Maybe this feature is not that good. So let's change the rule back to the previous state until we fix it. Automate it in the pipeline because you can include production monitoring data from your application, from your end users in that pipeline, and then make the right decisions. Automate it. And that's the beautiful thing.
I like both those use cases, and I got a funny feeling that if we all watch Tom's GitHub repo over the next couple of days, we might magically see some of that come through. Did I just commit you to something, Tom?
Yeah, so I think so. I love the idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. Now, I mentioned that so I could subtly then link to the next bit. Everything you just demoed is in your GitHub account, right? And that's a public repo? Okay, well, I'll make sure that
So it's GitHub.
Sorry, Tom, repeat.
Oh, sorry, it's my last name, McGonagle, and then it's /F5 file. If you go to GitHub/McGonagle.
I'll include it in the article so people don't need to try and write that down from this episode. I guess my last question then, I mean that was great. Thank you for showing us just how easy it was to kind of bake that in. It wasn't even really a long F5 file with what you achieved there. But I guess for anyone who's watching who's thinking, okay, this is cool. I wanna start experimenting here. I mean, where do you start? I was amazed actually when I first looked at it that there was even a download for Mac OS X. I'm actually running it natively on my laptop, not in a virtual machine. Like you literally can run it locally on your machine and start working out how to build these workflows. I mean, you worked at CloudBees. Like, where should people start after taking a look at your examples in GitHub? What next?
So I'm just going to share my screen again, Nathan. I just want to show the README file that's included with the F5 file repo. And so it is incredibly easy to get started. The first thing you have to do is just get the Jenkins.war file. And so that's from Jenkins.io, latest right here. So just get the latest Jenkins.war, and then on your Mac, it's just as simple as running Java -jar Jenkins war, and that straps Jenkins. And then the next step is to, this is, by the way, this is all inside my README, is you license Jenkins, and you install the Ansible plugin and the Slack notification plugins in Jenkins. And so just in case people don't know where to go to do that, Jenkins, and then you go manage Jenkins, and then you go down to modules, manage plugins, excuse me. For Slack. I'm in the wrong place. So there's these tabs right here. There's updates. If you go into available and then search for Slack, you can see that the Slack upload plugin is right here. And you just click on it, and then you click on install. And you do the same for Ansible. And then in terms of installing Ansible, Ansible's not as easy as Jenkins, but it's only slightly more difficult. So it's a matter of installing Python. It's a matter of installing a couple libraries that are necessary. It's a matter of installing Ansible lint and installing Big Suds, which some BIG-IP interface or module, Python module, and then F5 SDK. And then I use Git for my source code management. And so I flew through this, and I apologize if I went a little too fast. But my README has all the steps to instantiate a poor man's Ansible Tower infrastructure. It's very, very simple.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And Andy, any closing comments? You provided some great insight and on the importance of this informed-based automation, you know, understanding what it is that you're deploying into and what the impact might be of the deployment you just made. Like, where can I learn more about that? How can I get better at bringing those kind of competencies into my automation?
Sure. So I think you can share my Twitter link, maybe under Andy. I have a lot of speaking engagements where I also share the slides on SlideShare. I call it metrics-driven continuous delivery or shift-left quality. You will find there's a lot of YouTube recordings out there. I did a DevOps Boston presentation last year and a lot of different meetups and conferences. So whatever search engine you prefer, metrics-driven, and my last name, Grabner, then you will find it. And if you just share some of the links, we have a free version of Dynatrace for especially developers, free for life actually. The plug Jenkins that we also have is free. And as you did, go to the plugin section, search for Dynatrace, it's all there. My own YouTube channel where I actually walk through the whole thing step by step. And I believe the best way is if I just give you some links later on. If you can put it on there, then people can find out all the information.
That would be great. Yeah, more than happy to share links to help people get informed. That's what REDtalks is all about. It's just about sharing this knowledge. We've got so many awesome examples I get to see when I talk to customers and partners and even just peers in the industry that I don't even really cross paths with, but I just want to hear about what they're doing. And this channel is all about just sharing that information to help enable others. So I appreciate both of you taking the time to share some of that information. And yeah, please do send me your links and I'll post them in the article that ships with this video. So on that note, we'll close out this episode. But that was great. I really enjoyed that we brought a very dev-centric tool into a very infrastructure deployment and just showed how easy that really is to start crossing those kind of crossing that chasm that's always been, thou shalt not pass before now. So guys, thanks very much. You've been listening to Nathan Pierce, your host of REDtalks, and Tom and Andy. Say goodbye, Tom and Andy.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right. Thanks for coming along. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.